Let's take a look at some basic, what we call macroeconomic concepts, which could be helpful to you for that recent reading that I gave you on current state of the economy regarding the national deficit. So here we are with question 1, the rate of economic growth. How is it measured? We've talked about this briefly in our class, but it has to do with the gross domestic product, and that would be the difference divided by the original amount. And we've been doing this percent change calculation where it's the new value minus the old value divided by the old value, which is the same as this one right here, and multiplied by 100 to convert it to a percentage. So calculate the difference from one year to the previous year, divided by what that previous year was, and then convert that to a percent, and that's how economic growth is measured. Expansionary fiscal policies lead to this type of spending. So expansionary means growth. And so when the government is taking action, so what kind of spending are they going to be doing? And that's what's going on right now, is that it's going to lead to deficit spending, essentially spending money we don't have, so it has to be borrowed from somewhere. The prices at which currencies are traded is called, okay, so when we're taking a look at trading money, what do we call that? And so if we're selling money to a different country or we're buying currency from another country, the price of that is something called the exchange rate. So it's not a one-for-one conversion. It changes based on how a particular economy is doing in comparison to the rest of the world. So that's called the exchange rate. You know, for example, if you want to go to Canada, you need to have Canadian dollars, and so when you go into Canada, you would go to a bank or some place where you could convert your money, and you would take a certain amount of US dollars and buy Canadian dollars. And so you'll either get more or less of Canada's dollar depending on what the exchange rate is. An increase in the value of currency. So when money increases in value relative to another country's money, that is known as appreciation. To implement expansionary or growing fiscal policy, the government is going to do what? How are they going to do that? And that is the topic of that article that I had you read. So what kinds of things could they be doing here? Let's see. Expansionary policies. Increase taxes, increase spending. I like the increased spending. Decrease taxes, increase spending. That one sounds very reasonable. Increase taxes, not decrease spending, no. Right now the government is increasing spending, as you read in that article, by incredible amounts. So, going to decrease taxes, increase spending. The decrease in taxes would allow people to have more money to spend, which could help with expansionary fiscal policy. So we like this one here. A period of high economic activity and high employment is recovery, recession, slowdown, a boom, a period of high economic activity and high employment. Just the opposite of what we are experiencing right now with this COVID-19 situation. We've got a lot of unemployment and we've got very little economic activity going on. So that's leading to a serious slowdown, if not an outright stoppage, but it's slowing down a lot, and eventually that'll lead to a recession. So this one though, boom. Why is monetizing the debt inflationary? Inflationary meaning that the prices of goods and services is going up. Monetizing the debt means that the government allows the central government allows the government to borrow and spend freely. Monetizing the debt creates stagflation. No. Monetizing the debt decreases inflation because there's a decrease. No. There's more money, not a decrease in the money supply. It's got to be 3. Monetizing the debt increases inflation because there is an increase in the money supply. Definitely. We're in a period right now where the money supply is increasing, which could lead to inflation. GDP, gross domestic product per capita, which refers to per individual, per person, gross domestic product per person. And so we are going to take the gross domestic product and divide it by something here. Value of capital inputs. Remember, per capita is people here. GDP divided by the population. Per capita, population. The government borrows money to cover any deficits it runs by. So how are they going to do that? Right now, the president just signed a huge $2 trillion piece of legislation to put money into the economy. How are they going to pay for that? Increase taxes, issuing bonds, borrowing money from the banks, borrowing money from the federal government. They are the federal government. Issuing bonds, so they're going to sell bonds. Essentially, it's like an IOU. They promise to, at some point, you're borrowing the money by selling these bonds. You got to pay these back with interest at some point in the future, which is usually a big concern, but we are in this emergency situation. So a lot of economists are arguing that right now it's more important to try to get the economy and keep it in some stable fashion while we're going through this crisis. So issuing bonds is the way they're going to borrow the money. A deficit. A very, very, very bad thing to have. Not necessarily. Right now the argument is we need to run a deficit during this COVID-19 crisis. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes and borrows to cover the difference. That sounds very reasonable. Okay to have, too general of a term or a phrase there. The sum of all the money owed by the government. That would be the national debt. So the government's spending more than it collects in taxes and borrows to cover the difference. That's what's happening right now, this year. Which of the following will increase economic growth? An increase in unemployment? Definitely not. We need people working. A lot of old people? No. Investment technology? That could increase economic growth. Looks like there's more than one. An increase in incomes? Definitely. More money that people have. They're earning more. They're going to spend more. That sounds very reasonable. I don't like that one. That doesn't seem very specific. Plus, they'd be retired and not really helping the economy grow, except spending money. Increase in unemployment is definitely not that one. I'm going to go with these two. Got to move that out of the way. Okay, that was good. The value of all final goods and services produced within a nation in a given year, and we've talked about that. That's a gross domestic product. Which of the following is not a consequence of economic growth? Okay, so which one of these would not happen during economic growth? There would be more pollution. There would be improved living standards. There would be more employment, so I don't like that one. That's the only one. Increased incomes, yeah, that would happen. So the only one that would not be a consequence, I clicked it wrong before. Less, it's got to be this one. So go through those a second time on your own or a third time to make sure you get those. And then you might want to read that article a second time if you haven't read it a first time, just so it makes a little bit more sense. And hopefully this quick quizzes here will help you some better understanding of macroeconomics, those things that affect the entire economy as a whole.